Welcome to Volume 4 in the series, WSÁNEĆ, the Saltwater People, with Earl Claxton Jr. This series is dedicated to learning about the unique and rich history of the WSÁNEĆ Saltwater People and their traditional connection to their Salish Sea Homeland, including S DÁYES, South Pender Island. Earl Claxton Jr., a WSÁNEĆ elder, will speak about how he became involved in the WELÂNEW Tribal School's plant nursery and garden. He will share some of his vast knowledge on native plants and go into detail about the technique for reef net fishing, an ancient and sustainable salmon harvesting method of the WSÁNEĆ people. That and so much more. This recording was made in December of 2023 on the grounds of the WSÁNEĆ School Board. I'm your host, Chris Wakaluk, and it is my pleasure to present this series to you. The series is made possible with grants administered by the South Pender Historical Society. I would like to thank my co-interviewer, Robert Dill, president of the SPHS. Without his help, this interview would not have been possible. Both of our voices have been extracted from this final audio in order to give maximum time and clarity to the interviewee to communicate and share their stories. Thank you very much for listening. Here is Earl Claxton Jr.'s story.
My English name is Earl Claxton Jr., and my Sinchothan name is Thathaikton. And that name comes from my great-great-grandfather from Malahat, who long ago, when the European people first came here, they couldn't speak our language and we couldn't speak theirs. So they came into our territory with a hat with names in it, and we were asked to pick a name out of the hat, and that would become our last name. But my great-great-grandfather, Thathaikton, whose name I carry, he was a very stubborn man, and he said, "No, my name is Thathaikton, and that's it. I'm not changing my name." So Claxton is the anglicized version of Thathaikton. And I always thank my ancestor for his stubbornness long ago, because Claxton is an unusual name in our community. Other families have names like Joe, Bill, Smith, Henry, names like that. And I also carry a name from my mother's side, from North Shore, Vancouver, Squamish, and that name is Kiepelenoch, or Capilano. So I'm a direct descendant of Chief Capilano from North Shore, Vancouver. And I traveled over to the Longhouse over at Squamish on the Capilano Reserve there. And that's where I took that name. And my mom, who is a residential school survivor, she was so happy she almost cried that I took that name. And so I wear all my names with great pride. And I come from the village site of Sayout on the Saanich Peninsula, one of the 4 village sites of the Saanich, which also crosses over into the U.S. side. The Lummi are also Saanich, and they speak Sinchothan and do all the things that we do here, pit cooks and fish on a stick and all those things. And I was very glad to see that my dad was doing this kind of work here at the school, because I knew how important the language was, and I also appreciate the work that John's dad did, late Dave Elliott. His efforts to save the language started many, many years ago when he started to develop the alphabet that's being used today. And I talk about it in the schools when I'm there saying that we didn't have a written language. All our history and creation stories and all those things are all tied together. And it was only in recent times that the alphabet was invented so that it could be taught at the school here. And I have to say I'm very impressed with the work that they're doing here at the school. It was about 4 years ago, I think I was up at the greenhouse. That's where I do most of my work here, is growing native plants. I had surgery on my head about 31 years ago now for a double aneurysm in between my two brain halves. And it took me, a long time to recover from that. I was in intensive care for 6 weeks, and then I got transferred to Gorge Road Hospital, Rehabilitation Hospital, and they taught me how to walk again and feed myself, that kind of thing. And I was in there for 6 months at that hospital. It seemed like I was never going to get out. I was always in the hospital, it seemed, and I was so happy to be able to get home and stay at home. And my mom took care of me. She took me out walking every day, and I got my strength back. And I was sitting at home and I was thinking that I was strong enough now to get back out into doing something. And I was wondering, what can I do? There must be something that I can do. And just then there was a knock at the door, and I opened the door and I was handed a notice from the band office notice. And they were saying that there was a course here at the tribal school, a horticulture course. And it was the second year, and they were looking for anyone that was interested in doing that. And I thought, yeah, that's a good idea. I can grow good big vegetables, and I can be a benefit to the community. And so I came and I took the course here, and I had a lot of fun that year. And the teacher, he had a great interest in native plants, and he instilled that interest in me of the native plants, as well as my grandmother. I can remember being with my grandmother, and she would point out certain plants at Sayout, and she would say, I planted those. So I was pretty impressed with my grandmother being able to do that. And I always thought it seemed like she was going to be here forever. It always seems like that. You think that whoever you're with or you see or get to know, that they're always going to be there, but it's not that way. We're mortal, and one day we're going to be gone. And so I really appreciate being able to speak and say some words so that my words get saved too. Because I can remember my dad saying, all this information that I have, he said, it's not mine. It belongs to everybody. And so I've taken on that thought too, so that I believe that all the information that I carry, I freely share it with everyone, and ask the schools if they could record my stories when I tell them, and in the classroom. So that's an ongoing project, and I'm always looking to be recorded, and I greatly appreciate the opportunity here to do that. My dad used to travel down to Lummi. They hired him to do language work down there, and he'd travel there with Tom Sampson from Sarlip here. And I went down there with him. He asked me to go with him, so I said, yeah, I'll go. And we went down, and we ran into a fella from Lummi, and he'd never met him before. He just met him, and they started speaking Sinchothan, and it was just like they were old friends from way, way back, and that they'd known each other for as long as anyone can remember. But I was astonished that that they could speak like that, like real good friends, and it just, I think, shows the connection of the language there. And I always do talk about the WELNEW people, that they invite us to travel over there to partake in their reef net fishery that was never outlawed there, but was outlawed here. And we're getting back to doing those reef net fishery here again. And it's still illegal to do it, but the last one that I attended, we informed Fisheries and Oceans that we were going to be doing a reef net fishery that day, and they came out and watched, but they didn't do anything. They just came to watch to see how we did that. And we've been doing reef net fishery for as long as anyone can remember, and it was an important part of our economy, and I really believe that that was why it was outlawed. All the technologies of the SÁNEĆ, I'm always impressed about many things, and the reef net is one of them. I don't know how the SÁNEĆ knew where the fish were going to be, but they had about 126 different reef net sites out on the Gulf Islands and the San Juan Islands. And the salmon, when they're coming from Alaska, when they get to the end of the upper end of the island, Vancouver Island, they either come on the inside passage that's between Vancouver Island and the mainland, or they continue to go around on the outside and come in through the Juan de Fuca Strait on their way to the Fraser River. And they like to travel in about the middle of the ocean when they're traveling. And there was a part of the reef net that was done. There was a mat, that special mat that was laid at the front of the reef net, and it had bundles of dune grass, I think it's called. I don't know what it is in Sinchothan, but it's tied on with stinging nettle fiber, and so it lays down flat when it's out of the water. But when it's lowered down into the water, it floats up and imitates eelgrass. And when the salmon come, they see the eelgrass and they think they're down too low, and so they come up. And when they come up, they see the men in the canoes and become alarmed and scared, and they can see the dark hole ahead of them, and they dive in there to escape. And there was a hole made in the reef net because the SÁNEĆ believed that one school of salmon was one family, and they didn't want to take the whole family. And so they had a hole made so that some of them could escape. And there was conservation was in the minds of even then, when my dad said there was so much salmon in the water, he said it looked like you could walk on the water. And they were spawning in every stream, every river, every creek, and there's even a ditch that runs by my house at Sayout. He said that salmon were spawning in that ditch. He said, I know they were going up there, he said, because I could hear them swimming up at night, going up there. And when he told this to Fisheries and Oceans, they didn't believe him. They thought he was making it up, that it couldn't possibly be like that. But the salmon was a rich source of our economy. We dried the salmon right hard. It takes about 7 days and nights of smoking to to get the salmon right hard. And my dad used to bang, bang, bang his fist on the table. He said the salmon was that hard because we didn't have freezers or refrigerators or vacuum bags or mason jars. All those things we didn't have. And even knives to cut the fish. My Uncle Lou, he told me one time, he said long ago, he said we had a sharp stone made that would cut along the spine of the back of the fish and then around the head and around the tail. And he said then they would finish it with their hands. When I heard that, I had to try it to see. And it works. I tried it. And he said that the women, when they were doing the fish like this, he said they were doing it casual, just talking, just across from each other and finishing doing the salmon. And I still remember the first time I tried eating a smoked gwelach, old a spawning chum salmon. And my eyes got big and I thought, wow, this is really good. And I've shared it with my Juanitan friends, and their eyes get, when I give them some, their eyes get really big and they say, wow, where can I get more of this? And I say, well, just come out and help me catch some salmon, help me cut it, help me hang it, and help me smoke it, get the wood, and that kind of stuff. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of hard work, but it's worth it. It's just such a delicious food. And my dad said that we ate fish every day. He said we ate salmon every day. He said, except for once in a while, we ate something different. And he said he would watch his aunt or mom when they were making supper to see what they reached for. And he said, it was salmon. So he was pretty tired of eating salmon every day. And because of that salmon every day, we had to devise different ways to eat the salmon so that it would give it some variety. So it would be in soup or on a stick baked next to the fire or in a pit or dried in the sun or smoked. So all those different ways. And then sometimes I fry a piece in the pan. Just delicious. And even to this day, I still crave having a salmon, and I look forward to the next time I can cook one and eat. Everyone likes my cooking. They said it's the best salmon I ever ate. And one time I was cooking down in Todd Inlet, fish on a stick, and a woman, a Juanitan woman, came up to me and she said, I want to hear your beliefs about the salmon. So I told her about the reef net fishery and said that the shaman or medicine man traveled out with all the men from the village, and they all went out to help catch salmon for the village for the year. And he was there to open the fishery with a prayer saying, please come back again next year. We're still poor yet, and we still need your sustenance. And that opened the fishery. And he was also out there to keep count of the salmon. He knew how much the village needed for the year. And then when there was enough salmon for the village, he closed the fishery by selecting one salmon for ceremony back at the village. And the children were told to go out and collect armfuls of sword fern so that they could pack the salmon up the beach to show it respect. And they were packing it up to a cook that cooked the fish on a stick. And he cooked that fish up, and then he gave it to someone that was attending the ceremony that day. So I had talked about this ceremony at the school for many years, but I'd never witnessed one myself until more recent times. I was out at S DÁYES near the Pelkey reef net that's in what was called Bedwell Harbor Resort at that time. The reef net's right in front there in front of the reserve there. And I did cook the salmon, and many people came, and I was really pleased to be able to be part of that ceremony. And all the people that came, when I started cooking the salmon, there was just me and my mom and one other fella from here, from Sartlip. And I cooked up the salmon, and I gave him the salmon because he stayed there and helped. So I was really pleased about that. But because of the salmon, all the salmon we ate every day, and the camas that we cooked, that was our potato. And when the Juanitum came, they introduced potatoes to us, and it was so similar to the way that we did our camas that we easily switched over to using potatoes, so that many Salish people don't even know that we used to eat camas. And so that's part of the work that I do. I grow camas at the greenhouse now at Pepake Haute, the blossoming place. And our plan is to be able to supply people with camas. And the Sanish found that if you disturb the roots of the camas, like dig it up and then put it back in the ground, and they didn't dig the camas up individual. They had the fields, big fields of it, and they would cut sections of the grass and then roll up the sod and pick out the bulbs that they wanted for cooking, and then roll the sod back, and that was enough disturbance of the root. It caused bulb growth when you did that, and they had big bulbs the size of their fist. And I asked my dad one time if he'd ever witnessed a pit cook with camas, and he said, "Oh yes." And I said, "And how much camas did they put in there?" And he said, "Sacks and sacks." And I was thinking, my gosh, they must have been digging for weeks to get that many, because the biggest one I'd seen up to that time was about the size of my thumbnail, and I thought that was a pretty big bulb. But then I found out that they made them as big as their fist. I said, "Oh yeah, I guess that's how they were able to do that." And the bulb, when it's cooked like that in the pit, it converts the starches in the bulb into good sugars. So it was such a good diet that our people regularly lived beyond 100 years old, and some of them were 130 years old. And our people believed in karma, so that if you did good things in your life, good things followed you, and health was one of them. And if you did bad things in your life, illness could fall on you. And if you became ill, you were supposed to stop and reflect on your life, on what it was that you did that's causing that illness to fall on you. And it was such a strong feeling. I can remember my grandmother, late Elsie Claxton. She was dying from cancer. And I remember her saying, "What was it that I did that was so terrible? It's causing this disease to come and take me." And it was such a strong feeling for her that she refused to take any chemotherapy or any of the other cancer drugs. And so I lost my grandmother. And like I say, I always thought she was going to be here for forever, it seemed. And she did lead a good life, I think. And she learned lots about plants. And I think the knowledge of the Saanich in regards to plants is very strong. It's like the collecting of the seeds and the starting of the seeds, especially camas, were collected, and new seed or new plants were started every year. They were always seeded in, and when the camas first comes up, it looks like a blade of grass, and from that point to flowering is 7 years. So it takes a long time for it to bloom. And I think when the Hunitum surveyors first came here, it must have been springtime and the camas was in bloom, because when they got here, they liked to climb up to the high points of the land and look down on the areas that they were going to survey. And they noted that there was an area down there that was, they said there was a lake or water pond down there. And when they got down there, they found it wasn't at all. It was a field of camas that was in bloom. And they thought it was water. And it would, I think if you looked at it from a distance, it would look like it was water there. So it was really amazing. And it's in the Garry Oak ecosystem, because when the leaves fall from the Garry Oak and compost into the ground, it changes the acidity of the soil, and camas loves that acidity, and so they always grow near Garry Oak trees. We had a feast here a few weeks back, and we cooked up some of the camas and using a slow cooker to try and imitate the pit cook, because that's what needed to be done, that needed to be cooked. And so it reminded me, when I saw it, of garlic when it's cooked or baked in the oven. It gets soft and mushy, and I don't like garlic when it's like that. I can't eat it. I don't like it. But the camas, I liked it. We served it on crackers, and it was delicious. And that was really one of the first times that I got to try it. Many, many years ago, there was a young fella, he dug some up, and he cut them up into small slices, and he baked it in the oven, and they became like little chips. And I tried that, but I didn't care for that at all. But I did like the traditional way, where it's all kind of mushy. Well, all the plants that we grow there at Peak and Hote are all destined for replant down in Sneedquith, Todd Inlet. And we grow target berry plants. So trailing blackberry, thimbleberry, salal, huckleberry, all those plants. And even we grow oak tree from seed for transplant. So we targeted berry plants because that was part of our heritage. Was when all the men traveled out to the reef net site to help catch salmon for the village for the year. All the children, all the women, and all the old people went and lived in the forest and picked berries and processed the berries and dried them in the sun for storage in the winter, because the berries had to be dried right hard And that was our way of storing food back then. So it was an important part of our heritage was berries, and I think that's why we targeted growing them. And I know how to propagate plants, either grow them from seed or from cuttings. And some plants are very easy to start. The thimbleberry and the salmonberry are both easy to propagate from cuttings. And also learning about, there's a bird that travels here in the summertime, and it's called, English is the Swainson's thrush. And my dad said it was called the bird that ripens the berries. And it's got a beautiful, haunting song that I always like to listen in the forest or near my house to hear their arrival, because I still feel like they are ripening the berries. When they first arrive, the salmonberry has got berries on it, but they're hard and green and just starting to get the first blush of color on the berry. And then when the last berries are ripening is when that bird leaves here. So I can see how they call it the bird that ripens the berries, because it's here. And other birds that migrate here are the ones down at Goldstream called the American Dipper, and they travel here specifically for the salmon, the chum salmon that they're spawning in the river. They're looking for eggs that are floating downstream, and you can see them flying in the water going upstream. It's amazing how they can fly in the water as if they're flying in the air. Same thing. And they pick off any salmon eggs that are coming down there. And I still like to travel out to Goldstream and take chum salmon out of there. And it's been going on for so long that the eagles and the cougars and bears, when they get a salmon, they take it out of the water and eat it and leave the carcass or drop the carcass of the salmon on the land there, and it composts into the ground, and the trees take up the nutrients from it. And they tested the tops of the trees there and found that there's salmon DNA in the top tips of the trees there. And that's why the trees are so big there, because of the salmon that have been going there for as long as anyone can remember. And I used to go down and fish at the river on a real nice day. I always liked to go when it was sunny and not raining. But I found that when I went there, I could hear the Hunitan people talking about me, saying I shouldn't be allowed to go in and do that. But I think it's really important for us to be there practicing our treaty right. And also, I think it's important to be seen practicing your treaty right, so that people don't say anything. So I stopped going up on sunny days and would go up when it was pouring down rain, because I know the Hunitams wouldn't be out there. And now I still go up there and catch salmon. And it was a hard year this year. It was, I think, one of the lowest returns that they've had at the river there. But I still have hope for the survival of the salmon. And I think fisheries and oceans is a misnomer. I don't think they're there to help save the salmon or whatever. They're there more to facilitate fishing lodges and fishing licenses. And they still, if they see anyone harvesting clams say out on the beach, they pull in there and they have their guns on their hips and come in and they tell you to dump your clams out. But I don't understand it. I don't know why they spend money on enforcement yet won't spend money on trying to repair the ocean and make it so that we can collect clams again. I can remember at Sycam, when the tide goes out there, that goes way out. And long ago, I can remember whole families out there digging clams. Not only Salish people, but also Quinitam people would be all out there digging clams. And so it'd be a food source for everyone and not just us. So I really think that fisheries and oceans can do a better job of trying to help save the clam as well as the salmon. There was one native blackberry, and it's called a trailing blackberry, and it's got a real limp branch that needs to grow up on other plants for it to get up there and get sunshine. And it's the female plant that has a separate male and female plant. And it's the female plant that has the berries on it. And sometimes you'll find a patch of berries and there's no berries on it. It's just all that, they're trailing blackberry, but it's all male. Yeah, the berries were picked all season, from the first ones that start in the spring. The trailing blackberry, I think, is one of the first to bloom. And of course, the Himalayan blackberry was introduced here, and there's lots of it. It likes it here, so it's all over the place. And I used to think how terrible it was to have those kind of berries here. But my thoughts changed after a while, that I could see that the bumblebees also liked to pollinate that plant. And so there's lots of berries and they feed the birds. So it's a good thing. So when I was down in Todd Inlet, we used to dig them out. And that's really hard work to dig one of those out of the ground. And there's so much cement down there, it's everywhere, that when you can barely dig down without hitting cement. So my dad said that long ago they had bricks or cakes of berries that were dried in the sun. And when they wanted to use one for the next day, they would take it out and submerge it underwater for overnight, and it would plump back up, and they'd use it like a fresh berry the next day. And also, one thing they used to do is I took a skunk cabbage leaf, and with the berries that they were picking, they would mash them up and spread them onto the leaf and dry it in the hot sun and peel it off the waxy leaf and finish drying it. So when I heard about this, I had to try it myself too. And so I did. I went and got some skunk cabbage leaves and got some berries and mashed it up and tried it, and it works. Except one time I left it out in the sun too long and the leaf dried. And so when I tried to peel it off, it stuck to the berries, and it's not very good. It doesn't come off very good. It's hard to get off. But certainly it's a good thing. And thimbleberry and the salmonberry, they like to send shoots underground, and then they pop up next to the plant. And those fresh shoots used to be picked and the skin peeled off and eaten in the springtime. And those were eagerly picked because after a winter of eating dried salmon and dried berries, those were the first greens of the year. And so people would go out to Goldstream and say, pick a whole bunch of it because there's lots of salmonberry out there and lots of berries. And that the salmonberry is an interesting plant in that it ripens in 3 different colors, red, yellow, and orange. And there's a song that goes along with that plant, and it copies the Swainson's thrush song. And they talk about the red, yellow, and orange in that song, and about that bird. So it's an important visitor to us. Things have changed, I guess, or started to change. I got hired about 7-8 years ago now to work in the Sauk School District, and I was amazed when I first heard it was called a territorial acknowledgement, and I'd never heard that before, and I thought it was a marvelous thing to recognize that they call it unceded land. And I know that when I was growing up, that all the lands outside of the reserves were always referred to as the stolen lands. And but when I really noticed change was when the Kamloops announced that they had found some unmarked graves near the residential school buildings. And I know that we always all knew, all of First Nations knew that there was children that had traveled or got taken, and some of them didn't come back, and that there had graves there. And I can remember when they announced that, when I went to work at West Shore, they were all just completely devastated. They couldn't believe that this had happened. And I just didn't feel the same shock because I knew already that there was children that didn't come back. And not only at residential schools, but also at, I think, some of the special hospitals that they had, that there was children that didn't come back. But it's been a real swing, I think, from that time, that I feel honored to go into the school and speak. And I always tell them that I'm honored to be here today because there was a time when our voices were silent, that people didn't ask us what the name of a place was, or what's the name for that plant, or those kind of things. And there's more respect, I think, being shown. And I don't think some of our children that are coming up now are more integrated with the Hunitan people, and they want to be like them. They want to be the same. And I feel more honored and accepted in the schools now, especially when I cook. And I think I always tell people that we need to walk together to heal. And I still believe that. And I think food is definitely one of the ways that we can connect and heal, all of us together. Because I think everyone is traumatized by what happened to us, the way we were treated. My mom talked about how things used to be when she came here. She said that Sydney was the worst. She said when you went to a restaurant, they wouldn't serve you, and then eventually they'd come over and tell you that we don't serve your kind here. She said that they could even come up to you and spit on you. And she said if you complained, she said you were the one that got thrown into jail. So there was a real difference there. And when I first started working at the Souk School District, I really expected it to be more redneck and logger-like there, but it wasn't. I was totally accepted when I got there, and they welcomed me in there, and they still like me to be there. They call me the star of the show. So I liked going there, and I started working at Maria Montessori Academy, and I get treated real good there, I think. I like working there. And I really enjoy being able to talk to the students and tell them creation stories and about many, many things. And sometimes they ask me to repeat the story. They said, I like that story, I want to hear it again. So I tell them the story again. But I have hope that because of our language surviving, that our culture comes through, and I believe that I hope one day that our laws that we had are melded with the Hunitum laws, and that's part of the healing process. But when I first started coming to school here and found out my dad went to school here, he said it was grade 1 to grade 6, all in this room here. And I didn't start at this school. I went to Saanich Elementary, is where my mom put me. And she's a strong believer in education. She says that education is the step up for First Nations. So she's always been a big fighter for education. And she was one of the mothers that went over and protested at Indian Affairs in Vancouver. And it was through those mothers' strength that the school is here today. And I always feel like I know that it's been progressing and getting better every year. And my mom said their dream was that one day that this would be a university here. So that's part of the steps, I think, that's going to happen here. Is one day there will be a Senchothan University here, and it'll be a great day for all of Saanich to have that dream come true. And my mom still suffers yet. I know my cousin was talking about being hungry and starved, and the same for my mom. She said she was always hungry and always looking for food. And even through all that, she says that education is the step up for First Nations so that we're not a burden on the white man, is her words. So even though she was treated so badly, and she took those nuns and priests to court and won many years ago, but she still feels that they still owe us for the land, the stolen lands. And that's my dream, and I think every person that works here at the school or anywhere else, that's the goal, is improve the lives of our children that are coming up. And I know I mentioned it earlier about when I was working up at the greenhouse one day, and one of the students came in. It was a grade 4 class, and one of the little girls asked me a question in Senchothan, and I was amazed. I couldn't believe it. I didn't know what she said, but I was still felt pretty proud that our children are coming up and having a chance to learn. We didn't, when I was growing up, we didn't have that chance. And even I can remember taking history in class, and the only time the First Nations was mentioned was if they helped thwart an attack by the French or the British or the Americans. And that was the only time that was even mentioned in the books. But I think we certainly had more input than anybody really realizes, and still have lots of knowledge and information to pass along to the Quinita people, and that they will learn from us too, as we've learned from them. We've always taken the things that we thought were good from the Quinita people, such as knives and such, and lighting fires and things. So before that was flint was an important thing to trade for. So, and canning food, I learned how to do that and how to make jams and such, and all those things are good things. When I make jam, everybody tells me I make the best jam they ever tasted. It's because I don't load it up with sugar. I use this as minimum as I can. And even my little nephews and nieces, they always say that too, that I make the best jam in the world, they said. So all those things they all add up. Everybody does their part and contributes in their own way. And I'm proud of all of them that are coming behind us. They're all doing good things. So I'm happy about this place. Happy that I landed here. Because as I say, I started at the elementary school with the Quinitum classes there. And one day I was playing in the basement and my hand got jammed in the door. Somebody slammed it shut. And my grandfather was just furious. He thought that somebody had done it on purpose. And so when my mom dropped me off there at the school, he came later in the day and took me out of there and brought me here, and I started going to school here. And then when my mom got home, she went to go pick me up at the other school, and they said, oh, an older gentleman came and picked him up and took him. And so that's when she found out that I was going to school here. So it was a good thing that I came to learn here, and I did learn, I guess, about more being a First Nations person at that time, but Indian, I guess, back then, which is an outdated term. And somebody asked me that just recently in one of the classes. They said, how come if that word is such a bad word, it's still being used, it's still called the Indian Act? And that was kind of a hard question to answer. I said, well, the Indian Act has been here for a long, long time, and there's hardly ever been any amendments or changes to it, only voting, I think, and Bill C-31, which was the women that had lost their status, that regained it through that legislation. And I can remember when I was working for the Sayout Chief and Council, I was a young fella then, and sometimes I'd get to a meeting and they'd say, Earl's going to do his report first because we're sending him to Ottawa, and they'd hand me the tickets. And that's when I found out that I was going to Ottawa, and I'd have to hurry home and pack my bags and go up to the airport and catch the plane that afternoon. So it was some different times there working for the chief and council. My dad was the councillor, and my uncle Lou was the chief, and late Ray Sam was also on council, and they were always strong and supportive of of the work that I did. But they would say, yeah, we're going to send Earl because he's young and he doesn't have any children here yet. And so we're going to send him. So I got to go to all the Assembly of First Nations meetings. And I can remember when they were talking about the Bill C-31 and the Alberta people, they all walked out because they said they didn't want those people back, those women, because they knew what they were doing already, and we don't want them back. But there was the other side that said, we know who our people are and we want them back. And so that's how I feel, it's the same way, that we know who our people are and we want them back. And I think that the government has no business in saying who is and who isn't. And I got asked this just recently because of the Buffy St. Marie thing. They asked me what I thought about that. And that's what I said. I said, we know who our people are and we want them back. It's the same thing.
Thank you very much to Earl Claxton Jr. for doing this interview. This interview and the entire series has been made possible with funding from the Capital Regional District, the Pender Island Community Resource Center, the WSÁNEĆ Leadership Council, SÁNEĆ School Board, the Pender Islands Museum, and the South Pender Historical Society. Thank you to all these organizations for contributing to make these recordings possible.